like we were treating folks that are community members as, second class, third class citizens, which is tough. And it is tough to kind of balance those two, where you are trying to take care of folks who are using the parks and not living in parks, and folks who are using parks as shelter. So yeah, it is really tricky. Not an easy letter, I'm sure, but I think kind of echoing what Bonnie said, time and space to think creatively about that and what we'd want maybe our messaging to be like going forward, or how we can push each other to think kind of outside the box, is what I would advocate for.
Thank you, Tamara.
Hey, I could chime in here. This is Pune. Thank you, Paul, for creating space. I just want to echo, what Bonnie and Tamara brought up. And, I think one of the big reasons why, like, I couldn't sign that letter, I feel like I've shared this a couple times. I work with folks who are houseless on Metro property. And I think that, there's, oftentimes I feel like these folks get left out of the conversation when it comes to racial equity. And, I know it's a hard decision, but it's getting to the point where we need drastic, bold changes to really support these individuals. And so I'm happy to chat more and share more information with folks. But, I just want to appreciate you, Paul, and folks for having the conversation, and just know that feel free to reach out via email to me, and I'm happy to, share a little bit more of the perspective from the folks that I work with.
Thanks, Pune. Anyone else who'd like to share thoughts, concerns?
Yeah, Paul, I do. This is Randy. My internet's being really unstable, so I'm off video. I guess I was really caught off guard by this and by the whole thing, and it happening so close to the holidays, and for me personally within the foundation at the when we were really charging on our year-end fundraising, this sort of popped up like a rake in the tall grass, and it seemed to be the case for everybody, and I kind of wanted to get a sense of if that was everybody's experience, or if this had, the issue had been lurking for a while, and I had somehow just missed it through the parks networks. I just wanted to understand that, because my board executive committee stepped up and wanted a letter very quickly. Personally, I'll just speak from my heart. I was very uneasy about it. I have many friends who worked on the Metro homelessness initiative, and understand that we are in a time in which we need tactical solutions to this humanitarian crisis. And I just didn't feel like I had enough time to really absorb the information and have a thoughtful response. And one would think that this would normally come through, the infrastructure committee, since it's dealing with land use and all of that. So I just kind of wanted to unpack that a little bit and understand kind of how it, again, like the others, thank you for making the space to talk about it.
Sure, I'll just lean in for a moment just to add some clarity, and I might actually ask Todd to lean in as well. But yeah, it did come a little bit like a rake out of the tall grass. That's a great analogy, Randy. It didn't come to the normal parks channels. That was part of the reason why it came up so quickly. It was through a process that BPS was engaged in, but it does affect parks. So that's why it just suddenly showed up. And we were concerned that because it was going to be a permanent change, that we didn't want to be asleep, essentially, as this major impact potentially unrolled. So Todd was closer to it. Todd, can you add a little bit more clarity for us, please?
Sure. Go ahead.
Just before Todd speaks, I just want to state one thing. Well, BPS has been working on this, on a proposal, the shelter to housing continuum proposal. The proposal to include open space came through the Planning Commission fairly late in the game. So Parks had known about the shelter to housing continuum that's been going on for, the conversation's been going on for, I think, 9-10 months. So the proposal came through the Planning Commission at the last moment, and that's sort of when I raised the red flag and really sort of pushed it out the door, because we also didn't see that there was going to be an issue with the direction it was going until there were a couple of members on that commission who sort of decided that they would like other options considered. Todd?
Exactly. I was just going to add. So one of the reasons why we have shelters and community center, why that's allowed, is because the city's still in the state of a housing emergency. And so technically that housing emergency expires April 4th, 2021. But back in February 2019, the city council directed BPS to work on, different tools and different ways to look at our zoning and planning documents to make shelters, how we could have shelters and more affordable housing in the city. And so early on in that work, open space zoning was off the table. And as Director Long just said, it's only in the more recent conversations through the community, the Planning and Sustainability Commission, and is like a Parks Board, like like the Parks Board, the community members. And so ideas about including open space, not for permanent shelters, but for temporary shelters. And the current draft consideration is that 180 days in a calendar year, and you could stack them up next to each other. So a full 12 months, if you put 180 days from July through the year and then went into the next calendar year. So one location in a park or an open space could be used for shelter up to a year. And so that's what's on the table now with that community group. They're working through their work groups and having meetings, and that will eventually come to city council. And I'll just put the frequently asked questions from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability website, just so folks can look at it. It's maybe an easier way to consume it. I'll just flag, you'll see in the Q&A that it talks about 180 days for the temporary shelter, but when you actually go read the code, the 180-day limit isn't in a calendar year. So you stack up to 180 days together and you get a year in the same location.
Thanks, Todd. We've got a few more minutes for this topic, so I'm eager to hear from other people as well.
Juan has his hand up.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I don't think I have enough information to make an educated decision about this. I know something about the homeless situation, but do we have data on the epidemiology of this people? Like how many? What is the number growing? Where are they coming from? What's their age range? Are there any children involved? How many have mental issues? How many have jobs? I feel like if you're left out to just make a decision based on very little information, and I go and take my kids out on a park and I see a bunch of tents and my kids can't play there because there are people, and they ask me about the trash and whatnot. I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want to see that. That's my gut feeling. My first reaction. Are we a city that is more benevolent than others to these kind of people? So they are coming from everywhere. all this information, I think that if we're going to make an educated decision, I think we need more data on this topic rather than just touching briefly and then moving on. So that's all I'm going to say. I thought the letter was appropriate, by the way.
Thank you. Who else would like to share some thoughts? Patty.
One thing that concerns me is, and again, I agree with Juan, I don't have enough information to make an informed decision on this. But one thing that does concern me is the displacement of would-be park users by the very presence of people living in the parks. If there's no direction as to which parts of parks might be used temporarily for residents rather than this blanket, what appears to be a blanket, okay. I'm not quite sure how to manage that, but there are certainly areas like play areas in parks, for example, which are frequented by children, which one would not want to have people living in, so that the children can continue to use those things. And I think one can make the same distinction about other functions of the park, those which would directly displace park users are probably not the best place for temporary housing. So I wonder if there is some way to condition, if this has to move forward as a temporary thing, if we have some way of conditioning whereabouts in park spaces temporary housing might occur.
Yeah, if you think that you're going to have a kid playing next to a syringe disposal bin, you're dreaming. That's not going to happen. That's not good for kids. If you think that you're going to have a situation in which you have people camping in a park and a bunch of kids playing safely, unsupervised, it's not going to happen. I'm telling you, as a parent and as a physician who treats children and talks to parents for a living. There's both sides to this coin. One is the homeless folks who are there and need help, and on the other hand are the tax-paying citizens of Portland who also deserve to feel safe using parks. And I think that those need to be heard as well.
Paul,
Yes.
if I could just add, just to clarify. So just two things that I heard Patty say is, one is this is a permanent change. So it's not a temporary change to the zoning code that's being considered, where the temporary housing emergency, that's what's expiring, but this is a permanent change. And the second is that there's not consideration from the Planning Sustainability Commission to legalize informal camping in parks. What they're considering is designated areas across all zones, including open space, for temporary shelters and services that would be managed by a nonprofit organization or some other organization. So just we're clear what's on the table.
Thank you, Todd. So lots of good points brought up here. We're not going to get to the bottom of this today, but appreciate that we were able to dig into this a little bit, and just for sake of agenda, I'm going to move on at this point. But yeah, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and we'll see how this unfolds. So thank you. All right. That brings us to our working group reports. And Tamara, you're first on the list.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, so this last month, it's, with holidays and illness and everything, we weren't able to meet, but I did start a proposal. So that's exciting. And I was looking back through some of my notes from the feedback we got from our full meeting. And I was, again, just impressed with a lot of the thoughtful insights and responses from our group. So I'm hoping to consolidate more of that this week, and then we'll meet. But yeah, so hopefully we'll get more of that honed in. And definitely folks who were at that meeting, you can expect an email from me sometime soonish to get a little bit more feedback and just to see if I, consolidated what you said in an appropriate way. But that's all from me.
Okay, thank you. Mike, financial sustainability.
Yep, thanks, Paul. So at our working group meeting last week, Jason Scott stepped us through the Parks financial planning process. And one of the things that he reviewed with us is the ongoing budget monitoring process that the Bureau uses. And part of that was an overview of a concept they use called the burn rate. The burn rate is the rate throughout the year at which budgeted expenses and revenues are realized. So the current burn rate is touched on a little bit in, I think, in Adina's monthly report. So with 42% of the fiscal year completed, the realized expenses are only 38% of the budget, which is a slower burn rate than normal. And this obviously has something to do with COVID, but not entirely, is my understanding. On the revenue side, the story is also somewhat positive, with realized revenues are 47% of the budget for the year. So essentially, the burn rates are low where you want them to be low on the expense side, and they're high where you want them to be high, which is on the revenue side. So that's all good. At our next meeting, Chris Silke, who's the Bureau's asset manager, is going to be giving us an overview of the park's known asset portfolio condition and some other assets of asset management. So given the $500 million deferred maintenance situation, that should be pretty informative for us. So we're hoping to learn quite a bit from that. Also at the last meeting, Claudio gave us a brief update on the 21-22 budget. With the guidance from City Council, we're looking at about a 5% reduction in the allocation from the Parks General Fund. But because of the shortage is probably going to be backfilled with revenues from the levy. So hopefully operations won't be significantly impacted by that. On Thursday, we're going to have our last budget advisory committee meeting prior to the date that the budget is due, which it's due on the 29th. At this meeting, the BAC is going to be able to provide some input on a lot of the budgetary issues. And as part of the normal process, there's going to be a letter from the BAC to the council commenting on the proposed budget. And someone from the Parks Board is going to be included on drafting that letter. So there'll be appropriate input from the board there. And then finally, one last thing just on sustainable future. I've touched on this on the past. Parks is currently hiring 2 key sustainable future positions, sustainable future manager, and also a levy coordinator who's going to report to that manager. So hopefully those positions will both be filled in February, and that'll be a pretty significant step in moving forward with sustainable future. Does anybody have any questions or any corrections from Claudio or anybody else on anything I just put in?
Nope, you nailed it.
Nope. That's it.
All right. Patty, land use and infrastructure.
Thank you, Paul. We met Tuesday last week, and we had a presentation on the Burnside Bridge replacement process. As you may recall, the decision was made not to try and reinforce the existing bridge, but rather to replace it, so that we have at least one bridge across the river after a major event such as the seismic event or whatever. So the process is proceeding at a good pace. Some decisions have been made on the general spans, but not yet on the bridge type. Randy and I are both on the Urban Design Advisory Group for that effort, and have coming slowly sort of focusing in on what look like the best options from a great many possibilities. We won't actually know what the bridge is going to look like until June at the earliest. It's a very deliberate process with a great many people to be consulted, but we are sort of staying on the stick, as it were, and making sure that parks issues such as access to and from the East Side Esplanade usability of Waterfront Park under the bridge and near the bridge are taken care of, and so forth. So that's really been our effort there. Other issues we've been looking at, I-5 Rose Quarter project. ODOT is proceeding, as you probably know. They announced last week the membership of their Albina Advisory Committee. A particular topic that we had raised with ODOT from the very beginning was the so-called freeway covers, whether they are indeed intended to be parkland or not, and we've advocated against that. There has been no movement on that. The consultant team on covers has been engaged, but it will not start work until March at the earliest. So we really are somewhat in the dark there as to what's going on. We continue to look at level of service for parks, looking at something other than the simple measure of how far away from a park people are as to whether they're adequately served, and trying to look instead at the density of population near a park and whether in fact everyone has an equitable share of facilities. And that's an ongoing effort, obviously. We've been looking at Grant Park improvements, nothing new to report there. In the South Blocks Master Plan, there's a historic landmarks application has been made based on the original landscape design of the South Park blocks. And the immediate significance of that is that it conflicts directly with the current thinking about how the green loop might be constructed through the South Park blocks. So now we're waiting for the state and others to determine whether the historic landmark status will be awarded, and if so, how then the green loop might still be accommodated to keep all of the functions working together. South Reach Plan was adopted on December the 16th, nothing new on that. Off-road cycling master plan, again, nothing new there. The Southwest Corridor Plan, as you probably know, there will be no action, at least in the next couple of years. And what will happen long term, we have yet to find out. So a longish list of things, but there we are. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bonnie. Sorry, Patty.
Actually, I have a question, Patty, and maybe or others. It was my understanding that the historic designation on the South Park blocks, there was some time-sensitive date on that because it was my understanding we had potentially a short period to comment on this issue between historic designation and its potential impact on green loop implementation. Am I mistaken there? Does somebody have better information than I do? Because I remember us wanting to shine a little bit more of a light on that in the full board meeting.
That's right, Bonnie, though I don't have better information than that.
Bonnie and Patty, I can answer that information if you'd like. This is
Thank you,
Lauren.
Lauren.
Yes, please. Lauren.
So the Historic Landmarks Commission will be reviewing the nomination at their public meeting on February 19th. So it's fairly quick, if that's what you were asking about.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't sure if they accept public comment at that hearing, or if, you know, in the context of the potential implementation of Green Loop, if there was going to be an opportunity for some integration between that plan and their consideration. That was all I wanted to make sure.
The public comments are accepted by writing or verbally by the State Advisory Committee on the Historic Preservation until they meet and review the submission on February 19th.
Okay, so it does sound like if we want to provide any comment to ensure that the green loop can be implemented, we would need to do it before February 19th.
Right, correct. And public comment can be submitted to the Historic Landmarks Commission and will continue to be submitted in writing and received verbally at the hearing. There's a hearing there on February 8th as well. So,
Okay. So I guess the question is, do we want to submit something in writing? And if so, what would that be? And I'll leave that up to Patty and Paul to others to discuss.
Okay. Yeah, I think based on what we've heard previously, we may want to write a letter. So we should probably just have an offline conversation about what our major points would be, and then we'll get that sorted out.
Okay, so why don't the three of us, Paul, Bonnie and I, get together and draft something after this meeting? We'll do
Okay.
that.
Yes, sounds good. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Did anyone else on the board have any comments or concerns about that? Of course, we'll share it with you when it's drafted, but I guess because this is our opportunity to hear from you, I wanted to make sure we shined a light there. Thank you, you guys.
Okay. Bonnie, is there anything to report on process improvement?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, there isn't. As I reported last month, the narrative that summarized what happened with the tree planting did go out to everybody. And I don't think anybody had any questions on that. Again, my understanding is that this process improvement is going to occur in other functions that cross the bureaus, both bureaus of Parks and BES. Again, those were the two bureaus that the late Commissioner McNick-Fish was really interested in trying to look for some cross-bureau functions that could be made a bit more efficient, while also ensuring that community members were heard. So, really that's a placeholder in there so that as other functions get their turn, Parks Board stays in the loop. So that's all that is. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. And then Alejandra is going to present the work that's taken place on the affirmation of equity statement.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so I was really fortunate to get to work with Tamara and Casey on the affirmation of equity statement. We ended up with 2 different versions of the statement itself. And so our next step is to send both of those drafts over to Kenya for feedback. And the hope is to come back to the board with either the statement that Kenya took a liking to, or potentially both of those statements for discussion with the entire board, maybe in February. So that's all I have. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Alejandra? Okay.
Paul, this is Adina. Alejandra, I don't think you were at the last meeting or two, but Kenya had mentioned the timing of working on the Bureau equity statement. And I just want to make sure that folks are comfortable with ensuring that those 2 conversations are happening concurrently and not one in front of the other, because I think that they ought to complement each other. So I just wanted to flag that so folks don't have an equity statement to look at next month's meeting. That's probably the reason why. And I think Kenya's here if I'm speaking out of turn.
Yeah, I'm here. Great. My words exactly.
Okay. With that stunning clarity, we'll continue moving forward. Randy, it is time for the foundation report.
Sure. Hello again, everyone. I'll try to keep this quick to catch us up a little bit, but I think after a year of incredible pivots from completely different set of initiatives that we ended up doing than what we started the year with because of COVID-19. We ended up in pretty good shape. You know, we kickstarted the Sun School food box program with about $38,000 and did the first delivery of that way back in March, and then ultimately pivoted to the Levy campaign, which of course was successful. We did our first Friends and Allies Summit, and that was incredibly successful, and we'll be doing another one of those. But after all this work that was kind of not really in our original work plan for the year, we actually ended up in pretty good shape for the year. We had actually an incredible year-end fundraising campaign that resulted in about $100,000 in the final month. And overall, we increased our activated donors in 2020 by over 30%. 100 more donors. We increased the number of gifts by over 25%, and we increased the number of new donors by 65%. And the reason I brought that Sun School drive was that brought 185 gifts, and 70% of those were new donors. And we converted over half of those to operations donors at the end of the year. So it was a real success on our development committee and our development director, Lisa Sandman, and allowed us to end the year in the black. We actually made budget, which I was extremely worried about, having played such a prominent role in the Levy campaign. I feared that a lot of people would tell us, well, we gave it the Levy. So it gives us a great platform to stand on as we move into the new year. We are going to be doing another Friends and Allies Summit in April. First, in March 15th, we will return to our Green Dreams lecture series. And the first lecture in that series will be Liz Ogbu. The theme of the series will be Reinventing Downtown, Public Space, Creativity, and Social and Spatial Justice. And Liz is an Oakland-based designer and urbanist and spatial justice activist. And she's an expert in engaging and transforming unjust urban environments. She's a multidisciplinary designer and sort of innovator, TED Fellow, Aspen Ideas Fellow. She's done incredible work and is an incredibly inspiring speaker. And that will kick off the series, as I said, March 15th. And then we want to follow each of the lectures that we do with a kind of town hall to bring together local activists who are working in this space. So we want to spend some time kind of thinking about what role public space and our parks can play in downtown. Obviously, things are in pretty bad shape. And I think that the foundation, we really want to try to play a role in helping heal and create a different feel to the comeback of downtown, a different set of characters and creative minds to help us really make it a welcoming place for all. So we're working on that initiative. We'll be working on whatever restart of O'Brien happens as PBOT's plans to reinforce the garage unfold. We're working on an idea for a festival along the park blocks that will be based in some of these discussions that we're going to be doing, these public forums. And then we also are picking up, last year we had started to do a campaign around a kind of branding of Portland as the city of gardens in anticipation of the American Public Gardens Association annual meeting in Portland, which is going to bring about 9,000 people to Portland. And we've been working with Travel Portland and the Japanese Garden to kind of think about how we could really position Portland as a city of gardens. Well, COVID delayed the APGA conference until 2022. But particularly with Leach's opening, with their expansion happening, and just the general need to get some good news out there and start to, to celebrate again the incredible assets that we have, we want to pick that up. We created a guide, the first comprehensive guide online to all of our public gardens, both in Portland and in the immediate surrounding areas. And we have high hopes of going to City Council with a proclamation, to announce Portland as a city of gardens and develop a promotion. We're working with a TV channel around a promotion of that idea. And I think it could be, really just a good, shot in the arm for our city and people who love to visit our wonderful collection of public gardens. So we're working on a bunch of things. The most important thing, though, and Adina and I have a meeting tomorrow to sort of kick this off. The levy has so substantially changed the landscape that this is an opportunity, I think, for us to really think about what the next generation of the Portland Parks Foundation should be. We moved into last year thinking about trying to raise money for programs. That's less needed now. I think there's just an opportunity with a newly expanded board at the foundation that's raring to go. Younger board members, more diverse board members who really would like to sort of help us reinvent the foundation. And so we'll begin those discussions with PPR and try to really figure out what's the best way of collaborating moving forward. So happy to answer any questions, but that's what we're working on.
Randy, I just want to say, wow. You, in the middle of just a crazy year, were able to accomplish so much. And that's so exciting in terms of reinvigorating what the foundation's doing. So I just want to acknowledge that. Well done.
Well, thank you.
Any questions for Randy? All right, then we will move to Adina and the PP&R planning framework.
Great, thank you. As promised from our last board meeting, we have Tim Collier and his team here to present some information on the community listening sessions that were held mid to late last year. And so I'm just going to hand it off to him directly to give you some context and introduce the team.
Thank you, Director Long. And thank you, Parks Board. We appreciate you guys providing us with some time during your agenda to share some information about recent listening sessions that Portland Parks and Recreation organized for BIPOC Portlanders. With us today are community engagement staff, including Maya Spencer, Adair Katembwe, and Ken Rumbaugh. Team put together and designed these listening sessions and worked with internal and external partners to make sure that they were extremely effective and are here to provide different portions of the report. So community engagement at Portland Parks and Recreation has traditionally focused on working with community members to understand what they want and need when we develop new parks or rehabilitate existing parks. They also support the BAC and other targeted engagement efforts. As we begin our work towards summer 2021 and levy-funded operations, while using our Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland planning framework, we're going to be building stronger relationships with BIPOC Portlanders and with community-based organizations to help us understand what marginalized communities need from PP&R, how they can participate in decision-making processes, and how they can help us understand whether the work we are doing is meaningful and impactful to them and their families. So as we enhance our community engagement efforts going forward, we are not going to disregard the robust engagement work we have done in the past or what we have learned from the community through efforts like the community survey, level of service, and the tree planting plan. After the Parks Levy was referred to the ballot, we understood that no matter the outcome, no matter what the outcome was going to be on November 3rd, that the Parks Bureau was going to work toward creating anti-racist policies, practices, and programs to better serve marginalized Portlanders. So the community engagement team began developing listening sessions so we could hear from and listen to BIPOC Portlanders to prepare for whatever resource environment we found ourselves in November 4th. So over the next maybe 60 minutes or so, the community engagement team will provide a summary report on what we learned. And then we'll talk, then we'll walk the Parks Board through what amounts to kind of a condensed reenactment of what those listening sessions were like. The listening sessions and the resulting report are pieces of a larger engagement puzzle. And we're a lot closer to the beginning of our engagement efforts than we are to the end. So the report that you'll see tonight does not offer concrete solutions at this point, but it will be a living document that is adapted as we continue to engage internal and external partners. The report will be shared with the Parks Board periodically as new information is included. The reenactment portion of the presentation today of those listening sessions will hopefully help the Parks Board understand the context in which these conversations occurred during COVID-19 in a digital environment. Portland Parks and Recreations will provide many opportunities for the Parks Board to authentically engage with the Bureau in the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland planning framework. But today's exercise is truly designed just to be purely to provide context for what the report, how we did these listening sessions and how the report was created. So we're going to spend about 30 minutes presenting the report in its current form, and then we'll reenact the listening sessions for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have some time for questions. Does that sound good for everybody?
Sounds good.
Great. With that, then, I'm going to hand it off to Maya Spencer, who's going to provide a summary of the report of our community listening sessions. Maya?
Great. Good morning, everybody. Maya Spencer, again, she, her, part of the community engagement team. So here's what I'm going to cover in this presentation today. Goals and objectives of the listening sessions, who participated, some of the topics that were discussed, overall themes that we heard from the participants, and next steps for Portland Parks. The goal of the listening sessions was to build on past engagement efforts and explore more deeply concerns that we had heard from BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, communities regarding safety, equity, and access to parks and community centers. Then we'll use this knowledge to inform conversations with PPNR divisions to better serve marginalized communities as we plan our summer programs, begin our levy spending, and beyond that. Some of the prior engagement efforts where we have collected information about community priorities include the Community Needs Survey from 2017, the level of service work done from about 2017 to 2018, the 2018 tree planting strategy, and then all of the recent PPNR capital projects. For example, Mill Midland Park master plans for Del Burdine Rutherford Park design and Park Lane Park design. This information, along with these listening sessions we just completed, begins to create a foundation for our knowledge about community priorities. The objectives of the listening session were to ask BIPOC community members to build upon and expand on themes and knowledge gleaned from past community engagement efforts, for PPNR to listen to and document priorities of community members, and to provide an opportunity for community members to share their concerns about and their ideas to improve safety and access to PPNR programs, services, and facilities. So who participated in these sessions? We had 51 total attendees over a series of 6 different sessions. Due to COVID, of course, all were held online via Zoom, much like this today. Each session was about 1.5 to 2 hours long. 2 of the sessions were held in English, one with the Black Parent Initiative and one with the Bow and Arrow Culture Club. These are both partner organizations that PPNR already has an established relationship with. 4 sessions were also held fully in the top 4 languages that are spoken most frequently in Portland after English. So that's Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, and the Cantonese and Taishanese dialects, and Russian. And for these, we partnered with the community engagement liaisons, and they were the ones that led these sessions and then provided translated notes following the sessions for us. For this series of listening sessions, we used a combination of poll questions and open-ended questions, which Ken will demonstrate following my presentation. These questions were planned to explore information gaps that were identified by the 2017 Community Needs Survey. For example, when asked to identify barriers to visiting parks, concern for safety was the second highest answer on that survey, with 37% of communities of color selecting this answer. For those wondering, the top answer was not enough time, which is not a problem that we can probably solve for folks. Listening sessions we thought would provide an opportunity to dig deeper to understand why people don't feel safe and what can be done to diminish this barrier. The questions, as you can see on the screen here, focused on the following. Do you feel welcome in Portland parks? And then we had a series of questions to follow up on. If not, why and what would make you feel more welcome? Do you feel safe in Portland parks? And if not, why? What would make you feel safer? Does PPNR offer classes and activities that are of interest to you and your family? And are fees a barrier to your participation? So while each listening session was, of course, unique in its discussion, there were several themes that emerged from all of the groups. First, safety was a concern for a majority of participants. Specifically, they mentioned parks at night, encountering people experiencing homelessness, a lack of rangers or security, inadequate lighting, open drug use and paraphernalia, and overall cleanliness of parks. We also heard that recreation fees are a barrier for 73% of the participants, or 37 out of the 51. They expressed support for reducing or eliminating fees and providing more free family friendly events like summer free for all. It's a lot of F's there. One thing that was noted by some participants was that forms and paperwork, if those are required for discounted or free programming, that may create additional barriers for folks, so that it needs to be designed thoughtfully. Continuing some of the themes, we also heard that more variety and more culturally specific recreation programs, especially keeping in mind multi-generational households, was important. Folks also talked about needing more culturally specific outreach, marketing, and events. Some participants want to be involved in designing the programs. And overall, there was a lot of enthusiasm about the opportunity to talk with PPNR. People were excited to be part of the listening sessions, and many expressed their appreciation for their parks, their community centers, and programs that they currently participate in. So what are our next steps? First, we want to share this report with PPNR senior management, which we did yesterday, sharing it with the Parks Board today. And then following this, we'll begin rolling it out to PPNR bureau divisions so that they can also hear more about this work. We also would like to do additional community listening sessions with those that were not reached in this phase. And that could include other BIPOC communities, other community-based organizations, youth, older adults, and the disability. We also think that additional more focused community engagement will help refine division and bureau planning. And some of those topics may include planning sessions with BIPOC communities to begin developing the culturally specific programs, focus groups to explore fee structure options. That could be looking at things like scholarships, early registration, looking at paperwork, those kinds of things. Creating geographic and culturally specific gatherings to discuss ways to improve safety, such as lighting and the ranger program. And finally, culturally specific listening sessions focused on making parks and community centers more welcoming for BIPOC communities through marketing, signage, and outreach. So that kind of concludes the end of my presentation piece. I don't know if there's any quick questions. As we said, we'll move on. We'll provide some at the end, but we're going to turn it over to Ken at this point to do a little bit of the reenactment, unless folks had.
Yeah, I think it's probably best that let's move through the kind of reenactment of the listening session so folks can kind of understand the context these questions were asked. And then we'll open it up for Q&A, and then we'll also be providing the board with the draft version of the comprehensive report of where we're at, which kind of covers the main kind of themes that we heard, explains how the listening sessions were designed, both with internal and external partners, and also provides the kind of verbatim qualitative and quantitative questions, as well as the responses that we heard from these community members. So with that, we'll turn it over to Ken Rumbaugh to kind of run the board through this. And again, there's going to be lots of engagement that happens with board members through Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland, where we're going to get your actual input of what you believe we need to be doing with our resources and with the public, parks and community centers that we're responsible for. So this exercise is really just to kind of see what folks went through. All right, Ken.
Very good. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Maya. I appreciate you being here. So again, thank you, Parks Board, for being here. I'm going to walk you through a simulated, abbreviated version of the listening session. So I'll be in character a bit here as I go through the script and the introductions that we went through with community. If you have questions throughout, please jot those down or even add them to the chat, and we can address those when it's complete. So again, thank you for being here with us today. We're glad you're here. We really appreciate that you can make some time and share your feedback with us. My name is Ken Rumbaugh. I'm a member of our Parks Community Engagement team. I'll be moderating this session today. With me here today is Tim, Maya, and Adair, who will be helping with any questions you might have for us. You've all been invited here today because we value your individual perspectives. We want to hear from you and gather your opinions and feedback through this process. Please remember that there are no right or wrong answers, and please feel free to ask questions or share opinions with one another as well. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Please do use the raise hand function on your Zoom window if you'd like to add to the discussion. You can also use the chat feature to add comments. If you cannot hear someone talking, please let us know by making a little gesture around your ears like you can't hear. We do ask that you keep yourself on mute if you're not talking, but a simple gesture like this will let us know that you can't hear, and we can adjust from there. And if you can ensure you're in a quiet space for our conversation, that would be ideal. Our discussion today will take about 120 minutes. We'll be recording the session today, but we're recording it for note-taking purposes only. Your name will not be attached to any quotes if used in any notes or reports. Throughout the process, you'll hear us toss around some acronyms. If there's anything that's unclear to you, please feel free to ask that question in the comment in the chat function. One that you'll hear often is PPNR. PPNR stands for Portland Parks and Recreation. Any questions before we begin our listening session today? And yes, the 120 minutes was the actual listening session. This is a very truncated version of that. So thank you, Tim. So I'd like to begin today. Thank you all for being here with a video presentation from the Director of Portland Parks and Recreation, Adina Long. I'm going to share my screen and my sound. And for you.
Hello, I'm Adina Long, and I'm the Director of Portland Parks and Recreation. Thank you for taking time to join this community listening session. Portland Parks and Recreation wants to hear from you as we work to align our resources with the community's priorities, your priorities. The Portland Parks and Recreation Community Engagement Team is hosting multiple listening sessions with Portlanders, like this one, to talk about the future of our parks and recreation system. We want to continue to understand what you want from your parks, especially now that COVID-19 has changed our city and our lives. Your input will help inform where we go from here. That may include ideas you have to improve safety in parks, increasing access to swim lessons, summer camps, nature and trees, or anything else you think would make our park system more accessible, welcoming, and equitable for all Portlanders. And that's true no matter what resources we have. Some of these listening sessions are taking place while a ballot measure has been referred to voters. As public employees, we are very limited about what we can say and how we can respond to questions about ballot measures. With that said, please understand that your hosts for this meeting may be limited on how they can respond. But that's okay, because this meeting is about us listening to you. It is critical to have a diverse group of Portlanders weigh in on what's most important to them. We are listening to many of our neighbors' voices, including those who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people from refugee and immigrant communities, youth, and particularly youth of color, people living with disabilities, seniors, and other currently and traditionally marginalized communities. You may be hearing this listening session in English, but we are also translating them in the top 4 Portland Safe Harbor languages: Spanish, Vietnamese, Russian, and Chinese, specifically Cantonese and Taishanese. Serving the community is what we do and what keeps us going, but it's your park system, and we appreciate you being here. Thank you for taking part in this listening session and for helping us shape the future of Portland Parks and Recreation.
So thank you. And just as an FYI to our Parks Board, during our sessions that were conducted entirely in Spanish, Russian, Vietnamese, and Chinese, our contracted community engagement liaison services partner provided live audio translation of Director Long's message while that was playing for participants. So with that, we'll now begin our polling portion of the session. These questions, as Maya mentioned, were developed to help us dig deeper and fill information gaps, what we learned from the Community Needs Survey, in which over 2,000 Portlanders responded with thoughts and feedback. Before we do that, I wanted to share one more item with you. So we've heard from community that feeling safe and welcome is important when visiting Portland parks and natural areas, community centers, and pools. For those who may be unfamiliar with Portland Parks and Recreation, the following are just a few ways that PP&R strives to create safe and welcoming parks. We offer interpretation services to all customers to assist in registering or participating in parks programs. We actively program parks in summer free lunch programs with assisted play opportunities. We offer free public events, concerts, movies, and Parks for New Portlanders cultural events like soccer, or pardon me, World Soccer, and Stand with Immigrants and Refugees. Both those events welcome people into our parks and centers. We engage the community in park design processes like the new Gateway Discovery Park and the yet to be constructed brand new Park Lane Park in East Portland. We do regular maintenance in our parks to keep them clean and safe. However, we'd love to do a whole lot more. We offer community-based recreation activities specifically designed for children, teens, adults who have disabilities and or special needs. And our Park Ranger program, PP&R's Park Rangers serve as goodwill ambassadors and provide a positive public safety presence in Portland parks and park facilities. So with that, I'm going to dive into our polling. I'm going to share some polling questions 1 and 2. Parks Board, I do invite you to participate in this. As Tim mentioned, we're not looking for your direct feedback right now, but this is intended as a simulation. So with that, I'm going to share polling questions 1 and 2, and we'll get your responses and then share those once we are complete. You should see the questions on your screen. Question number 1 is, do you ever feel unwelcome visiting Portland parks, natural areas, community centers, and pools? Please choose one of the following. The options are yes, no, and I don't know. And I don't know, if you're wondering, would be for somebody who hasn't been to a park or natural area or community center. And then as you're answering that, I'll go over question 2 is, what would make you feel more welcome? And with question 2, please choose all that apply. And again, some of the responses there are more sports and recreation spaces, more culturally specific programming, more events and programming, more free programming. Oh, I just lost my, oh, it came back. Pardon me, my poll went away, but it came back. More active drop-in programming with no advanced registration required. More quiet spaces, more age-specific programming, more language-specific programming, and then other. And then the other will be, if you answer other, we'll invite you to expand upon that when we're complete. And as an FYI to everybody here, when I paused there, the polling went away. Folks had already responded, but it appears when it came back, those responses had been deleted. I'm unsure why. So with a thumbs up, everybody still have the polling in front of them?
I think it's because I may have control over that. So I'm not
I
going to
see,
pull,
yeah.
right? So I'm not going to pull.
Yeah.
I won't participate. I think.
Okay,
I think I
gotcha,
messed it
gotcha.
up.
Okay, no worries. We learned an awful lot while conducting these sessions, as you all have, I'm sure, through Zoom. We learn something every time. As a quick head count, how many Parks Board members are with us today? Do you know that, Paul? The actual number?
I think we have 15.
15. Okay. I'll give a few minutes for folks to, or maybe another minute or so for folks to respond, and then I'll close the polling and we can all look at the shared results. All right, I have 11 total responses within a yay or nay, so we can hear you. Anybody still submitting answers? Okay, I have 12 respondents. So I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and share the results. So you should see the shared results on your screen now. And with question number 1, again, do you ever feel unwelcome visiting Portland Parks, natural areas, community centers, and pools? We had 5 respondents answer yes, 5 said no, and 3 said I don't know. And what I'd like to do, and this is what we would have done with community, we would have invited a conversation about from anybody who responded in the affirmative, and yes, they had felt unwelcome. We'd ask for them to expand upon that. And Parks Board, I would, if you responded yes and you'd like to share something right now, we can take a moment to do that. Is there anybody amongst us that would like to share? Share with us why you answered yes. Okay, thank you very much. And just as an FYI, during our sessions, we had robust discussions with community when folks did answer in the affirmative there. And you can see question number 2 as well. And it looks like more culturally specific programming and more quiet spaces were the items that received the most votes with 6. It then looks like other popular responses were more free programming and more events and or programming. And there was one other. May I ask if you responded other, can you share with us what you were thinking there? Okay. Just and Parks Board, if you did answer other, is there something you wanted to share there?
Yeah, I can share.
Sure, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for doing this survey and this activity. It's very important. I think I also answered I don't know for the first question because I cannot speak for all immigrants, for all Black, for all Latino, but I can speak for myself and from like doing readings about environmental justice and doing research about the topic. I feel a lot of times it's you think about BIPOC and sometimes I had the feeling that everybody's on the same block, but there's a lot of diversity in there. So I think it's important to and go into places, especially like open spaces, to feel welcome. I think it's a process to create like sense of place, to create memories, to create good memories, to have association. You can associate your culture with the place you're going. So sometimes the small details, like doing some, I know it's some art exposition about some specific culture, BIPOC culture, about they might be close, like looking at the demographics close to parks, to community centers, to see what are the people living there, work with community-based organizations. So sometimes I feel like this lack of association, that like of not belonging. So like as a listening session, I would encouraging like getting to know more the community, just this process that we are doing here, and do like cultural specific programming, but not thinking BIPOC as one group, and understand there's a lot of diversity within BIPOC communities, because we talk a lot about representation, but there is also concerns about proportionality, like how much of this community is there and how much of this community is in decision-making position, how much of this community is it the same proportion, right? So thinking about the proportionality as well. Yeah, thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much for those comments. And yes, by all means, we are all here as individuals. So yes, as you're answering questions today, please respond as such. And we don't expect you to carry the weight of answering for any community other than for yourself. So thank you for those comments. Really appreciate that. Before we move on, I'd like to go back to question one and ask if there are any members that would like to expand upon their yes answer. Anybody among us want to expand upon that or share an experience where you didn't feel welcome? Okay. All right, thank you. I'm going to stop sharing the poll results. And Parks Board, with that, we then proceeded, that was, so those were two of the questions. We then proceeded to ask the remaining 13 polling questions and continued a robust conversation, again, to dig deeper on the knowledge that we gained from that previously mentioned community needs survey. And the verbatim questions and comments can be read in the document that will be shared with the Parks Board. And with that, that ends the simulation of the very truncated simulation of the listening session. And I would be happy to turn it back over to Tim and take questions if there are any from the board.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Maya and Adair. You know, the community engagement team is building a lot of new muscle and developing new skills as we're going to be going out and working with the community on a more regular basis to bring in this information, then to bring it to different divisions and to discuss solutions on how we can address some of the concerns that are brought up. This is just going to be an ongoing cyclical process that we're going to continue to move through. There's going to be times where we're going to find, low-hanging fruit that we can kind of address. And then we're going to get to points where we're going to need more nuanced information. And we're going to go work with community-based organizations, different community members to help our staff get the input from the community that we need to be able to design solutions for the barriers that folks are experiencing. I'll also, before we start the Q&A, we are not the only city bureau. We're not the only organization or private company that is looking to better serve marginalized communities in the city of Portland. And so I know a lot of you have jobs and networks, and just would encourage you that if you have done engagement around serving marginalized communities that may share information that could help us, we'd love to see that. And so just want to put that out there as well. Again, this is a piece of a larger community engagement puzzle that we're going to be working to support staff in decision-making for Levy and beyond. So just a reminder again, level of service, tree planting plan, and the community survey all have robust banks of knowledge for us to work with. And we're going to be combining those as we go and consult with internal partners. With that, we can open it up for questions. Maya and Ken and Adair all leaned into this effort. So we've all got different pieces of experience of sitting through listening sessions and working through the data. So hopefully we'll be able to respond to all of your questions. And if not, we'll be able to get back to you via email. So with that, I'll just kind of open it up for chat.
I have a question, which is that, and also kind of just a thought around, it was a great presentation and it was nice seeing all that. One of my concerns, just like in my own head, is thinking that the resources may be going into reaching 51 people on a format like 2 hours of Zoom, which is a hard, that's a real ask of somebody to dedicate that amount of time. And even in that format, Zoom, which we can see is sometimes people lose internet access. They might not even have access to that in the first place. I guess I'm wondering about what other options are you looking at, or why is a listening session, is the idea that you're able to go deeper than you'd be able to do in something that would maybe capture a broader range of Portlanders?
Yes, so that's a great question, Erin, and I'll provide a response and anyone else can kind of build on it. But Zoom, it was good for us to build some skills around this because obviously we're in a place where we can't meet in person, which is where the community engagement team really thrives. And so it was good for us to understand this, not just in the time of COVID, but also as an opportunity to future engagement, because just as, access to internet and that amount of time is hard, it's also really hard for folks to come meet in person. So having this as another tool is going to be really important. And then a listening session, yes, these questions were really pulled from knowledge that we gained from the community survey. And then to fill some of those gaps, like Maya mentioned early in the presentation, the community survey asked people about barriers to accessing parks. And a large percentage of people said that concerns about safety were a barrier for them, but that's all we got, right? And so we needed to dig a little bit deeper to say, if you don't feel safe, like, why don't you feel safe? And what are some suggestions of what we could do to make you feel safer in parks? So a lot of folks in East Portland said, we don't feel safe in our parks at night. They're not well lit, and we don't feel safe out there yet. We're living in apartments in the middle of somewhere, gets really hot. We'd love to be able to go out and access the park at night, but that's one of the barriers that we're facing. So that's some of the detail that we're looking to glean from these conversations.
Yeah, and Tim, I would just add that we know that traditional survey methods tend to attract a strong demographic of, I always joke that I'm the average survey filler out in Portland Parks is like a 40-something white woman. We tend to over-survey those groups and under-survey, particularly people of color. And even though the 2017 Community Needs Survey was weighted and they actually did specific outreach to make sure that they did get a more representative group of BIPOC Portlanders. Even within that group, I think it was overrepresented on the Asian population and underrepresented on the Latinx and Black community. So we kind of needed to go out and do further conversation with groups that we know won't traditionally participate at a representative rate in more traditional surveying methods, online surveys, phone surveys, and those kinds of things. So I think it was kind of two parts for doing the listening sessions. One, to have more of that story and conversation where people may feel more comfortable than talking to someone on the phone, answering us a formal survey, and then to reach some of these communities that we don't reach, even when we do strive to reach folks in these more formal survey methods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Erin, if I could add to your point about the 51 people in a 2-hour Zoom session, yeah, that would be difficult. These sessions, and apologies if we weren't clear up front, these sessions were 6 separate sessions that were anywhere from 7 to 12 individuals in the 2-hour session. So allowed for very robust conversation, lots of dialogue, lots of participation from all of our participants.
Yeah. And we were doing these in October, so it's starting to get dark early. It's cold out. I think if we were to do these in the summertime, we could look at doing like a socially distanced outdoor gathering to talk to folks, and so I think that would be a great option if it was that time of year. Yeah, I see Mike's got his hand up.
Yeah, thank you for all this information. One quick question, and I apologize in advance if you already said this and I missed it. When will the board receive the results of all of this, and in what form is it going to be presented to it? Is it going to be qualitative and quantitative data? Just kind of what will we have so that we can kind of assess the results?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Great question. It will be both the summary report that you basically kind of heard today, but you will also see verbatim questions that we asked on the qualitative side with those qualitative responses that were either notes that were taken down verbatim by our staff in the listening sessions that were done in English, or by our partners' cells during the conversations that were not in English. And then there will also be the verbatim quantitative questions and the results from that as well. My plan was to drop the PDF kind of report in its current form into our chat, as you're able to do with Teams. I'm not able to do that, so I apologize. I will get that out via email to the rest of the group. And then just a reminder that this is a living document, so it's going to continue to grow as we do facilitated focus group of staff to kind of figure out what we're hearing, combine it with other community engagement to start thinking through ways to address that. We're going to be adding that content to the report, so it'll change over time. And so we'll continue to bring that to the board. Tamara asked a question in the chat around compensation or other resources offered to folks. So as a public employee, we're limited in how we can compensate folks, but we were able to make sure that we were compensating the partner organizations. So Black Parent Initiative, the Bow and Arrow Culture Club, and the cells. And we do know that through the compensation we were able to offer them in the coordination of this, that they were able to provide compensation to the folks who were involved in the listening sessions. So making sure that people were getting, gift cards for grocery stores, things like that, as they were committing to, pretty good chunks of time to meet with us. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is we moved through a path that allowed us to do that.
And then Paul has his hand up.
Thank you. Today we had 5 people answer that they did feel uncomfortable in parks at times and didn't care to, or didn't take the opportunity to share that, which is not unusual, I think, in a public setting for people to feel like, I don't know if I really want to say why. So I'm wondering if there was an opportunity for it's harder over Zoom, but in a traditional meeting, we could have like note cards that people could fill out and that could be recorded. So how, if you did handle that, did you handle it? And going forward, what are you anticipating to do to make sure that people who are reluctant to speak in a public setting have some means to communicate their concerns?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Paul. And I can speak for, I sat in on all 6 sessions, and we had incredibly robust conversation. If any of our participants answered yes, that they had felt unwelcome or unsafe in parks, they were there because they wanted to share that with us. And we didn't have the experience that we had today, where you're right, that sometimes it's difficult to share, especially if it's a difficult story or something hard to recall. Difficult emotionally to recall that we saw today. But yeah, we did see, again, robust sharing of incidents, and you'll see that in the verbatim comments that you'll see in the report that Tim will send. With that said, I do like the idea of providing alternatives. And maybe we get even deeper responses if we provide an opportunity to provide that in a written statement.
Yeah, and Ken, I'll add to that. We had a lot of conversation leading up in the design of these sessions about who should participate from Portland Parks, because at first we had a lot of managers and a lot of staff saying, oh, can I sit in? Can I listen in? And we realized we didn't want it to be this kind of Zoom session like today, where you've got, multiple pages of people just watching this conversation and not participating. And so we really limited it down to, most of the time it was either just usually 1 or 2 staff people, like someone like Ken, that was just there to help put up the polling questions, particularly for the sessions that were offered in offered in multiple languages. There was no point in me sitting in most of those conversations because I wasn't going to understand the Chinese conversation anyways. It wasn't like I would glean anything from sitting there. So we did have a few recreation staff sit in that were native language speakers, I think in the Spanish session at least, and maybe one other session. So, you know, they would actually be able to follow the conversation and also could answer a question in that language if need be. But we really tried to step back and make sure that it felt like a small, intimate conversation. Again, like, you know, I think the highest we had was 12 participants in one group. So I think that created a comfortable space, and they were kind of affinity-based groups where people, you know, were speaking the same language or from, you know, a similar community. And so I think that created a comfort level for people to be honest. And we were very clear we weren't recording the conversation for, like, you know, public consumption. We just, the cells did record their conversations just so they could make sure their notes were accurate. But we were very clear that this was, you know, a space for people to talk openly. So I think that was important in designing it.
Thank you, Maya.
Yeah.
I see Tamara
Yeah.
has her hand raised.
Yeah.
Tamara, question?
Yeah, this is kind of looping back to what Lorena was talking about during the simulation. It's just fun to say that. Just curious about how, you know, BIPOC are being binned during the kind of analysis and summaries. Just thinking about how like safety in parks is something that you guys highlighted, and how, you know, for some communities safety might mean this, and for other communities it might mean that. So just kind of emphasizing, like, keying in on those nuances, as you've said, and recognizing again what Lorena said about, you know, BIPOC being incredibly diverse within within that. So yeah, I'm just curious if there's any avenue for that, or if that's kind of part of the plan.
So we are going to be having a lot of conversations with a lot of different folks throughout the community. And, you know, as we had these conversations, you know, it was really specific to, we want to hear from you and what you are experiencing. But we have a lot of past engagement, some that was done specifically with Indigenous groups, some that was done specifically with immigrant and refugee groups. So we have a lot to build on. We really prioritize this moment in our listening sessions, knowing that our resource profile was going to change on November 4th, you know, one way or the other with the levy. And we really wanted to go out and talk to these specific communities because we knew things were going to be changing, and we wanted to be digging a little bit deeper to be prepared, whether we were going to be having to pull back on resources if the levy hadn't passed, or if we were going to be in the situation we're in now where we've got some investments to make. But again, we are at the beginning of this conversation. We are going to be learning as we move through it, and we're going to be building stronger partnerships to make sure that we're able to pull appropriate information and that is more nuanced and specific, and then documenting it in that way. You know, as you look at the results when we send the report, this is 51 folks, right? 51 folks who took their time to kind of lean in and tell us what they thought. And so there are no necessarily silver bullets in here, but what's helpful is we saw a lot of reinforcement of themes and information that we've received in other community engagement. We saw, you know, more detailed descriptions of what barriers are for these individuals and suggestions around how we can address that. And so now we're going to take that information back to our diverse teams, have those conversations, and see whether we have enough to make decisions around program development or to address some of these concerns. And if our teams feel they need more, then we're going to go back and work with partners and have more nuanced conversations to get that information. Hope that answers your question. If not, please let me know. But I do hear you and Lorena that, you know, this is a broad community, you know, just like any culture, you know, one person's opinion does not say that that's the entire culture's opinion. And we're well aware of that. We're just really trying to do as much as we can right now to lean in and to talk with as many folks as we possibly can, and really trying to prioritize those voices of currently and traditionally marginalized communities. All right, we'll do a last chance if anyone else has any questions. And again, we're going to be able to have these conversations ongoing for years. So this won't be your only opportunity. And you'll see the report. I'm sure that that will spur questions. You guys can reach out to me directly if you have specific questions. Once you see it, we'll be happy to get you those answers. And really appreciate you participating today, both in the simulation or reenactment, as well as the questions. You know, your role as volunteers supporting the community are really important, not just in asking these questions, but helping us as we, you know, try to provide spaces that are healthy and safe and trusting for people to share information. So really, really appreciate you guys providing some space on your agenda for us to come and provide this presentation. So one more opportunity for questions. Okay, thanks again. You'll see the report in its current form come out via email later today. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, you're welcome. That was, it was really interesting to go through the polling like that, and the overall presentation was good. So really appreciate Tim and Ken and Maya and Adair for helping us with this today. All right, we have one more agenda item, which is sort of combined as memberships. So I'm sure that you're all going to be thrilled to know that because Parks has unlimited memberships in the Oregon Parks and Recreation and Parks Association, and also the City Parks Alliance, that all of us on the board are now members of those two organizations. So ORPA has a regular annual conference. They have some meetings from time to time. There's a lot of really interesting topics that are covered in that. So I would encourage people to become familiar with ORPA if you aren't currently. And then Parks also gets 10 memberships to NRPA, the National Recreation and Parks Association, of which the board is entitled to 6 of those. And so I'd like to have a little bit of time today just to see who would be interested. Actually, there's just 4 that are freely available because supposedly the chair and vice chair get 2 of those. So I guess it's the benefit of the extra time that we put in as the chair and vice chair. So I'm opening it up. So whoever would like to express an interest in either of those organizations. I mean, I have some thoughts that I can share in terms of who I thought would be good fits for that, but it doesn't mean that, you know, if we could, we'd have all 15 of us on that committee or membership rather.
Paul, I just wanted to offer that Alejandro is not here today, but I was thinking because of his interest, he might be a good candidate. So before we finalize it, we might want to try and loop him in. I know that he had a family emergency today and couldn't make it. So sorry to interrupt you, but before we got too far into the conversation, I wanted to just mention that.
Yeah, so.
And I would be surprised if the Forest Park Conservancy didn't have membership in that. So just to add that.
Thanks, Adina.
And I'm not quite sure, Paul, how one would take advantage of that, like why one on the board would be interested in that.
Yeah, they have webinars, they have all kinds of information related to parks. So it's an opportunity for all of us to learn more about things that are happening in other parts of the country, you know, in terms of trend setting or groundbreaking work that's being done. So it's just an opportunity to learn more about the state of the art of parks and recreation management across the country. So picking up on Bonnie's point, yes, we had a conversation thinking that Alejandro would be a good candidate for that. And to Adina's point, if he's covered through the Forest Park Conservancy, that's great. That opens up another membership potentially. So I was thinking, you know, in terms of our different working groups, that Tamara or Jenny from the Community Development Working Group would be people that we'd like to see if they'd be interested in that. Mike with the Financial Sustainability Committee, Patty from Land Use and Infrastructure. So that was sort of, you know, kind of a starting point. Everybody has full schedules. You're, you know, certainly free to decline if you don't think you're going to use it. but just wanted to lay out some thinking in terms of how we wanted to try and distribute it in a way that addressed the matters that we're addressing here through the board.
Paul, I'm fine to do it, but if there's anybody else on the financial sustainability group that would like to, I'd happily step aside for that.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I'm feeling the same. If someone has interest, I am totally okay with getting secondhand information. If somebody's a bit more dedicated to checking in on those things, that would probably be best.
So we don't need, Patty, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, with you and Bonnie are already represented, perhaps my inclusion would be redundant. So I would step back for that reason.
Well, thank you for each of you, offering to leave that opportunity aside. I would say that over the next week, if people have an interest, feel free to reach out to Bonnie or myself, and then we can finalize this and move it forward. And, we'll announce those memberships, and going forward, you'll be able to participate in the NRPA, and, feel free to check out the City Parks Alliance and ORPA as well. I think, there's definitely good programs at all those organizations.
And I'll add that if we don't have all of the spaces taken, they won't be lost because we can offer them to other partners.
Thank you. Okay, well then the next piece is if there are any notions about agenda for our February meeting, we can take that on. We may or may not be addressing the affirmation of equity statement. We'll have an offline conversation about that. So any other thoughts? And again, Bonnie and I meet with Adina and Brooke 2 weeks from today. Well, I'm not remembering our new schedule, but between our board meeting and our next meeting, we meet and we draft an agenda and we kick it around for a bit and then share that the week before our meeting. So we welcome input, particularly sooner than later, because as soon as we leave this meeting, we start thinking about the agenda for next meeting. So please feel free to share your thoughts and ideas about that. And if there's nothing else, we can wrap this up, get 5 extra minutes in our day today.
Paul, could I just mention real quick, we'll be posting the application probably this week for the Levy Oversight Committee. So if you or anyone that would be interested in that, we'll make sure we get it out to the Parks Board, but just wanted to mention that it'll probably be open for about roughly a month, but just to flag that for folks that is coming out very shortly.
Thank you very much for reminding us of that, Maya. All right then. Well, thanks everyone for a good board meeting today, and we'll look forward to seeing you all in a month. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you.